Global trade wars and their economic consequences. Introduction. Global trade wars are an ongoing phenomenon that can reshape international trade dynamics, influence global economic stability, and affect both developed and developing nations. These conflicts typically arise when countries impose tariffs or other trade barriers on each other in relation for perceived unfair trade practices or economic imbalances. While trade wars are often framed as efforts to protect domestic industries and jobs, they come with significant consequences that can ripple throughout the global economy. This article will explore the causes of global trade wars, their economic consequences, and the broader implications for businesses, consumers, and governments worldwide. Number 1. Understanding global trade wars. A trade war occurs when one country retaliates against another's trade policies by imposing tariffs, quotas, or other restrictions on imports or exports. The primary objective is often to protect domestic industries from foreign competition, reduce trade deficits, or retaliate against what is perceived as unfair trade practices. This section will define trade wars, explain their causes, and examine the key players involved in such conflicts, highlighting the historical context and modern examples of trade wars between major economies like the United States and China. Number 2. The rise of protectionism and its impact. Protectionism, characterized by the use of tariffs, subsidies, and import quotas, is a key strategy in trade wars. It is aimed at shielding domestic industries from foreign competition, often under the belief that it will safeguard jobs and stimulate local economic growth. However, protectionism can lead to higher prices for consumers and a reduction in the variety of goods available in the market. This section will analyze the rise of protectionist policies in global trade, their appeal, and the potential long-term economic effects on national economies and international trade relations. Number 3. Tariffs and trade barriers, tools of trade wars. Tariffs, which are taxes imposed on imported goods, are one of the most common tools used in trade wars. Countries may impose tariffs on a variety of products to make them more expensive for consumers, thereby discouraging imports and encouraging domestic production. However, tariffs also provoke retaliation from trading partners, leading to an escalating cycle of trade barriers. This section will explore the role of tariffs and trade barriers in trade wars, including their economic impact on both the countries imposing them and those being targeted. Number 4. Effects on global supply chains. Global trade wars have a significant impact on supply chains, which are often complex and involve the movement of goods across multiple countries. Trade barriers and tariffs disrupt the flow of goods, increase the cost of production, and create uncertainty for businesses that rely on global supply chains. Companies may be forced to find alternative suppliers, shift production to different countries, or absorb increased costs, all of which can hurt profitability and lead to inefficiencies. This section will examine how trade wars disrupt global supply chains and the strategies businesses use to adapt to these disruptions. Number 5. Impact on consumer prices and purchasing power. One of the most immediate consequences of trade wars is the impact on consumer prices. Tariffs on imposed goods increase their cost, and businesses often pass on these costs to consumers in the form of higher prices. This price inflation reduces the purchasing power of consumers, particularly in industries where imports constitute a large portion of the market. This section will explore how trade wars lead to price hikes on everyday products and the broader implications for consumers, particularly in sectors such as electronics, clothing, and food. Number 6. Economic slowdown and recession risks. While the short-term effects of trade wars may include price increases and market uncertainty, the long-term consequences can be more severe. Escalating trade conflicts can contribute to a broader economic slowdown or even trigger a recession, particularly if trade partners retaliate with their own tariffs and restrictions. The disruption to trade flows, coupled with rising costs and declining business confidence, can hurt economic growth. This section will discuss the risks of an economic downturn triggered by trade wars and the potential consequences for national and global economies. Number 7. Impact on employment and job creation. Trade wars can have significant implications for employment, especially in industries directly affected by tariffs and trade restrictions, while protectionist policies are often presented as ways to preserve or create domestic jobs. The reality is that trade wars can lead to job losses in sectors that rely on global supply chains or exports. Additionally, trade wars may result in layoffs or reduced hours for workers in affected industries. This section will examine the effects of trade wars on employment, focusing on job displacement, job creation, and the broader impact on the labor market. Number 8. Geopolitical implications of trade wars. Trade wars are not just economic phenomena. They also have significant geopolitical implications. Trade conflicts can strain diplomatic relations between countries, disrupt international cooperation, and alter global power dynamics. Countries involved in trade wars may become more isolated, while those on the receiving end of tariffs and trade restrictions may seek to strengthen alliance with other countries. This section will explore the geopolitical consequences of trade wars, including the potential for regional alliance, shifts in global influence, and changes in foreign policy. Number 9. The role of multilateral organizations in trade disputes. Multilateral organizations, such as the World Trade Organization, play an essential role in regulating international trade and resolving disputes between countries. These organizations provide a platform for countries to negotiate trade agreements, settle conflicts, and ensure that global trade operates under agreed upon rules. This section will discuss the role of the WTO and other multilateral bodies in managing trade wars, including their ability to mediate disputes and prevent trade conflicts from escalating into broader economic or political crises. Number 10. Trade wars and developing economies. Developing economies are often disproportionately affected by global trade wars, as they rely heavily on exports and international trade to fuel economic growth. Trade wars can lead to reduced demand for their products, higher tariffs on their exports, and a decrease in foreign investment. This section will examine the impact of trade wars on developing countries, focusing on how they are more vulnerable to trade disruptions and the strategies they can employ to minimize the negative effects of such conflicts. Number 11. The psychological impact of trade wars. The uncertainty and instability caused by trade wars can have a profound psychological impact on businesses and consumers. The constant threat of escalating tariffs and trade barriers creates an environment of unpredictability that can dampen consumer confidence, reduce business investments, and slow economic activity. This section will explore the psychological effects of trade wars, including how uncertainty affects decision-making, long-term planning, and investor sentiment. Number 12. Opportunities for alternative trade partnerships. While trade wars often create negative consequences, they also present opportunities for countries to explore alternative trade partnerships and diversify their economic relationships. Nations may look to establish new trade agreements, enter new markets, or negotiate favorable terms with other countries as they seek to reduce their dependence on countries involved in trade conflicts. This section will explore how countries can seize opportunities for new trade relationships and how businesses can adapt to changing trade dynamics. Number 13. The role of innovation and adaptation in trade wars. In response to the challenges posed by trade wars, businesses and industries must innovate and adapt to survive. These may include investing in new technologies, rethinking supply chain strategies, exploring new markets, or finding ways to reduce reliance on vulnerable trade routes. This section will examine the role of innovation in helping businesses weather the storm of trade wars and how technological advancements like automation or digital trade platforms can help mitigate the economic impact of trade disruptions. Number 14. Conclusion. Moving forward in the age of trade wars. Trade wars are complex and multifaceted events with significant implications for global trade, economic stability, and international relations. While they can create opportunities for certain industries or regions, the overall economic consequences can be severe, especially if they lead to broader economic slowdowns, job losses, and geopolitical instability. To mitigate the negative effects of trade wars, countries must seek diplomatic solutions, embrace multilateral trade agreements, and adapt to the challenging global landscape by fostering innovation, exploring new trade partnerships, and developing resilient supply chains. Ultimately, the future of global trade will depend on finding a balance between protectionism and open markets, with a focus on creating sustainable and equitable trade policies that benefit all nations. Conclusion. Global trade wars pose a significant challenge to the stability of international markets and the broader economy. The economic consequences of trade wars are far-reaching, affecting everything from consumer prices and global supply chains to employment and geopolitical relations. While the rise of protectionism may offer short-term benefits, the long-term effects of trade wars can be damaging to both developed and developing countries alike. It is crucial for nations to work together to resolve trade disputes and foster an environment that supports sustainable global trade, while ensuring that the benefits of economic globalization are more evenly distributed. By focusing on innovation, diplomacy, and multilateral cooperation, countries can minimize the risk of trade wars and build a more resilient global economy.